Hi guys, welcome back to Mentor, yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing great. I want to start this podcast with thanking all of you guys who sent in really nice comments and responses to my question on my last podcast. It's fantastic to see that you guys are appreciating what I'm doing and that you want me to continue doing this because, hey, that's why I'm doing it, isn't it? So, today on the podcast, pilot shortage. Does it exist? Has it ever existed? Are there any regional differences? And how does the future look? So continue to watch this podcast to the end. Make sure that you press the subscribe button if you like what you're seeing. And I'll be right back. Hi guys, welcome back. Glad to see that you're still here. So, pilot shortage. Does it exist? Has it ever existed? Will it ever exist? Okay. So, this is a very complex matter, which is why I am going to divide this discussion into a couple of steps. Okay. First of all, I want to talk about how things are now. And then I want to outline that there are some regional differences to this. And then at the end, I'm just going to give you my opinion of what I think is going to happen. And I want to stress this is my opinion. I don't represent anyone else. I'm only basing this opinion on what I've been researching, primarily from the big manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus, ICAO, and also what I've been finding online, basically feedback from colleagues out there. So I can be wrong, but I am going to tell you what I think anyway. So, pilot shortage. First of all, regional differences. I want to start with talking about the United States, because in the United States we have a fairly unique situation. United States are in a pilot shortage at the moment, especially on the regional market, and this is a completely homemade problem. Okay, it has very little to do with the actual need for pilots globally. It has to do with internal regulations within the United States. In order to understand the situation in the United States, we have to go back to the 1980s. In the 1980s, the American government decided that the flying sector was an essential sector, which meant that it couldn't be disrupted by things like strikes, for example. So the American authorities went in and they basically tied the hands of the unions behind their backs and said that you are allowed to exist, but you're not allowed to do this and this and this and this. Okay. So what happened then was, of course, now the airlines were free to make any changes they wanted really to the contracts of the pilots. Parallel with that, we had the big airlines within the United States, Delta, American Airlines and so on. They started to offer out the domestic routes within the United States to regional airlines. And the way they did this was they asked basically, who can do this the cheapest for us? We are going to sell you these routes. We want you to pay, well actually we are going to give you this, but we want to gain as much money as possible out of it. So we want the one that can offer the lowest price is going to get the deal. Now, of course, if you're a regional airline and you fly a small ATR or whatever, there are very little difference you can make on, for example, fuel prices. The big difference you can make when negotiating a deal is on the workforce, salaries, terms and conditions. So that combined with the fact that the unions were now kind of backbound, started a spiral of downgoing terms and conditions within the regional airlines of the United States. So what we ended up with was a situation where the entry-level salary for a first officer within a regional airline can be as low as $18,000 per year, which basically qualifies you for food stamps in there. Okay, very, very poor. You also have if you refer to my video, Life Quality as an Airline Pilot, you will still be subject to the same kind of disadvantages as any pilot will get, which is long working hours, possibly sleeping away from home, away from family, things like that. So basically, it made being a pilot in the United States much less appealing for people. Okay. Now, on top of that, we had a very tragic accident that happened. Colgan Air had a crash, I think it was in 2008, outside of Buffalo. And once the investigators were done with it, they found out that it was due to pilot error, and they deducted that it was due to poor training, poor capabilities of the pilots. Now, that can be debated, but that was what came out of that accident investigation anyway. So the FAA then reacted by changing the rules for starting to work for an airline at all. Okay, it used to be around 250 hours that was needed in order to get an airline job, potentially. They now changed it up to 1,500 hours and an air transport pilot license. So you need to have an ATPL in order to start working as a first officer for a regional airline. Now, if you know anything about this business, you know that in order to get your CPL to start with, you need to fork out between $70,000 and $100,000 to start with. And then in America, most airlines require you to have a degree as well, a college degree, which will cost you around $40,000. Okay, so you're up to over $100,000 already there for training costs, and now you need 1,500 hours. The only way to get 1,500 hours is A, pay for it yourself, B, work as a flight instructor for a school for very, very low money for several years, or do a combination of these, or do tow gliders or things like that. But if you look at the big picture, this means that you are going to have to spend a lot of money and a lot of time in order to get a job that doesn't pay very well. Okay, you see where I'm going with this? Basically, that dried out the local demand for pilot training within the United States. There's still a lot of training going on in there, but most of it is foreigners who are then going to leave the United States and go home to their countries and fly for their airlines. So this has left the regional airlines in the United States without pilots, and you can see this by some of the airlines are actually closing down hubs, closing down routes, because it just can't fly any aircrew to fly their planes. But as you can see, this is a combination of factors which are internal to the United States. It has nothing to do with the rest of the world or the global demand for pilots. It's just something that happened in the States. And my guess is that it will probably be some kind of changes to this in the future. But at the moment, that's how it stands. The major airlines, the bigger ones in the United States, they don't have a problem with finding pilots because they are cannibalizing on the regional airlines. They are coming there and saying to these pilots that are poorly paid that you can come and work with us. If you pass all of these exams and all of these tests, you can come and then you'll get up to the kind of salary that you guys are thinking about when you're thinking about pilot salaries. Okay, good money. So that's the situation in the United States. There is a pilot shortage. I don't really see an end to that unless they do something internally within America. So how about the rest of the world? Well, we have Europe. Okay, Europe, we don't have a real pilot shortage in Europe. We have a lot of low-cost airlines that require a lot of people for the next coming years. But we also have a quite good infrastructure when it comes to training, which means that there are a lot of pilots being trained every year, forked out into the aviation industry. So it's a kind of an equilibrium going at the moment in Europe, which means that it's still a lot of competitions for the good jobs. But then we come to something that's really interesting, and that's the Asia and the Pacific area. This part of the world is absolutely exploding at the moment. There are so many people that are now increasing their life quality. The brute national product is increasing. People have money now in order to fly, which means that there is an aviation market which is completely booming in the Asia Pacific and also in the Middle East area. Boeing has come out with a paper that's forecasting the need for pilots and engineers for the next 20 years. And they're forecasting that within the next 20 years we need a little bit more than 500,000 pilots to be trained. Okay, 41% of those is going to be needed in the Asian area. The Asian area does not have the training infrastructure at the moment. It's starting to pop up, but they have nowhere close to the amount of flight schools needed in order to supply the local demand. So this means that the Asian airlines are now using or trying to attract pilots from America, from Europe, and from the places where they can find pilots. And you can see this by salaries being significantly higher in those airlines, and they're increasing every day. Okay, the deals that you can get for going to China are getting better and better and better for every day that goes by. And this, my friends, this is an indication of where things are going. So If you have a huge area which cannot supply their regional or their airlines with pilots, there will be a suction happening from the rest of the world into this area through the means of money, which tends to be the case in the aviation world. They are then going to be supplemented, for example in Europe, by other pilots. Newer pilots are going to have the possibility to get up and into the regional airlines and into the low-fare airlines and even the established airlines, because some of their pilots are moving over to Asia to kind of reap the gold while it's still there. So it's good. This is an indication that I haven't seen for many years now. There's been talk about pilot shortage for as long as I've been around. That's 13 years. There's been talk about pilot shortage from way before then. But now I'm seeing something that I haven't seen before. Okay, now I'm seeing an actual increase in demand and an increase in terms and conditions. Not in Europe. In Europe it's kind of staying the same because of the reason that I've told you before. But from the Asian Pacific area, which is then going to kind of trickle down into the rest of the aviation world, if I have a guess. This is not going to happen fast. The aviation industry is very, very slow to adapt to these changes. There might also be a disturbance, which is something like the 9/11 attacks, for example, the outbreaks of the SARS virus, the international crisis, or the oil price shooting up. All of these are things that can momentarily slow down the economy, and that's what's happened. Basically, during the last, from September 11th and now, the global aviation industry has doubled in size, but there still hasn't been this huge pilot shortage that everyone has been talking about, and that is partly due to these kind of stops. But I'll show you a picture right now, actually. Where you can see that even though there's been a kind of plateaus in the development of the airline business and the demand for air travel, it's still been going steadily up and up. And that's what I'm seeing now as well for the next coming years. I think that as the Asian Pacific area is increasing in size and they're starting to get these huge aircraft orders into the Middle East and to Asia, then we will see more demand for trained pilots, and that is going to trickle down into the local economies. But you might have to be a little bit flexible, and this is what I'm always saying. You might have to be flexible of where you're living. So if you're in the United States and you really want to live in Kentucky, but you not want to move away from there, then no, I don't think that things are going to change soon. Same if you are bound to Europe. If you're bound to Europe, we will probably see the same kind of terms and conditions and the same kind of a demand for pilots that we're seeing now, because we have the infrastructure. But if you're willing to work, to go to Asia, for example, to start your work, or to move there if you're already in the business, I think that the outlook is looking fairly good for the next couple of years for pilots. For the airlines, it's going to be a struggle. When it comes to if airlines are going to start paying for training again, which is what I think that you guys really want to hear, I think that that will only happen when there is a real pilot shortage that is going to affect those individual airlines. This means that yes, I do think that in the Asian area, in the Middle East, we can already see this happening. They will start to increase the level of cadet schemes available. For example, in Etihad, Emirates, they're taking mostly local people though, but we will see more and more people getting paid, or getting at least their training paid. If it happens in Europe, the first thing you will see is that the airlines will start to offer these cadet schemes, and that's a good indication of where it's heading. If you see that they're starting to pop up cadet schemes all over the place, that will be the first indication of a real pilot shortage, because the airlines, as long as they can find pilots that are willing to pay for their own training, are willing to pay for their own type ratings, they will let people do that. But if they can't, if they're struggling, then they will start paying for it. Now, another question that I have seen popping around when it comes to the talk about pilot shortage is, what about all these pilots that are unemployed? There's sitting thousands of people without work. Now, the sad truth is that there is a difference between being qualified and being qualified for a job. Okay, and this is why I always push for doing a psychometric test before you start your training, because there will be people that do go through all of their training, pay for all of their training, and still will not be able to find a job because they won't be able to, or they can't get through the selection process. So I don't think that that's the case for everyone that's unemployed, don't get me wrong, but I do think that there is a significant amount of people who just will not pass these tests, and those they're not really part of the qualified workforce, even though in the papers they will be part of the qualified workforce because they have licenses. Okay, so that's just the sad truth of it. But I do think that there is a slightly brighter future coming up if you are willing to be a little bit flexible of where you live, and that is that's basically my view of it. So you have, just to summarize it all, you have very big individual differences between United States, Europe, the Asian, Middle East area, Africa, South America. There are big regional differences in the need for pilots, but seen globally, there is an enormous demand for pilots within the next 20 years. Over 500,000 that needs to be trained, and over 41% of those is going to be needed in Asia. So keep that in mind when you're doing your training. I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't see what's going to happen to the terms and conditions. But I do think that qualified pilots that are willing to work hard will have a bright future in front of them. Okay, good. I hope that answers some of your questions. And like always, if you do like these podcasts, if you think what I'm saying is making sense, then make sure that you press that subscribe button up there. Tell your friends within the aviation industry that this guy does funny things or whatever, so to increase the channel size. But for now, I am going to get out of this uniform actually, and I am going to have myself a lovely meal. So take care once again, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.